Did you guys ever hear of sea monkeys before? Of course you have. About 60 years ago, there was this huge craze. Essentially, you get this fine little powder in the mail, or however you want to buy them. You add this powder to a little bit of salt and water, and they hatch into sea monkeys. As hobbyists, though, we know that these are actually brine shrimp, and we use it as a live food source for our fish, especially small or newly hatched fish. This powder, which is literally a powder, is actually the eggs. Absolutely fascinating, isn't it? Now, what if we could do this with fish? Let me elaborate. What if we can go on the internet, choose from over 1,000 absolutely beautifully striking fish with all different types of colors and stay relatively small, yet grow astronomically fast in comparison to their size, yet their eggs can be shipped to you in an envelope? Granted, I know that that sounds entirely futuristic and maybe even sounds familiar to some of you, but what I'm talking about is something that a fish that's been commonly available to the aquarium hobby for a very long time, and in today's video I thought I'd tell you a story and introduce you to an absolutely fascinating fish. The killifish. Now, a few months ago, before Frank was put in this aquarium here, or before I even put this aquarium there, my plans were to actually turn this into a killifish kind of racking system. So I went online and I ordered about 400 different killifish on eBay, 9 different varieties. About 6 weeks later, they showed up. However, they came in the dead of winter, during a time that I was gone for about 3 or 4 days. So they sat in my mailbox, essentially freezing until I got home. When I got home, I was a little bit upset over the fact that, my plans for the killifish weren't going to happen. So I scrapped the idea and tossed Frank in this location and gave him this aquarium. To many people's excitement, Frank has his own little fan club, essentially. Now, running this aquarium gallery has a lot of unique expenses. Especially during the initial setup of the gallery, there was a lot of garbage as well as construction materials, etc. Basically, every few months I need to rent these massive garbage dumpsters. So over the last few days, that's what I've been up to, as well as spring cleaning and catching up on yard maintenance. Much needed yard maintenance. During cleanup, I realized I didn't actually throw out those eggs. And yet, I had very little hope for these guys. They were frozen solid for a few days. Some of them were past their hatching date. Some haven't arrived yet. I thought, why don't I just fill up a little plastic container here with some aquarium water and see what happens. So last night I started unboxing all of these killifish eggs. Essentially, they came in envelopes, which is absolutely amazing. I got 400 of them, 9 different species. It cost me less than $100. These fish are costing me pennies each for an absolutely beautiful fish that stays relatively small and is one of the most rewarding fish in the hobby to keep. Now, I had forgotten what I had ordered, yet all of the fish came with labels of what they are, some general information on them, how many eggs, their expected hatch dates, etc. The eggs are packed in what is a peat, and this just incubates the eggs. The reason why this works, though, is the most interesting. A lot of killifish are annual killifish. Some are not annual, but we'll talk about the annual first. Annual means that these guys only live for about a season. They live in waterways that are eventually going to dry up. So in order to ensure their survival, they lay their eggs in the mud that eventually dries up all the water, the adults die off, but during the next raining season or flooding, those eggs get wet again and they hatch into new killifish, completing the cycle. Unfortunately, again, they only live for 1 year, which is kind of sad, but there are different types of killifish that live for longer than that year, and they're not an annual. They are fish that are found in ponds and other waterways that simply don't evaporate. In fact, killifish are found in all over the world. So I decided I'm just going to start dumping all of them into one container. I didn't have very many hopes of any of these hatching, just because of what I explained earlier. However, I thought if I could just get one to hatch, it'll make doing this video worth it, simply to introduce you guys to a new fascinating world. So like I said, I got 9 different species, and some of them even came with some starter food, some microworms. But I had already prepared previously by buying some brine shrimp. I was going to hatch my own live foods out to feed to the newly hatched fish. And of course, I've shown you how to build a brine shrimp hatchery in the past. Yet having 9 different species, I was originally going to set up 9 different tanks, 3 on each level. And it sounds like I need tanks, but These Rubbermaid or Sterilite clear containers is really all that I need. Toss a sponge filter in there, the room's already heated, and I'm good to go. So these fish still do need filtration and heating, of course. Now, of course, adding them directly to the aquarium with all that peat does create quite a bit of a mess, but it settles out after a couple of hours. And usually within as little as 30 minutes, the fish will literally start to hatch. I didn't see that. I had to wait several hours. And by the way, I decided to do all of this at 1 a.m. this morning. I don't know why I do that to myself. My mind gets working at the middle of the night and I'm like, I want to hatch killifish, so that's what I did. Now the hatching can take up to 2 days or so, so I'm not overly concerned with how many I have right now. However, I did start to see a few in this bucket. It's just, they're really hard to spot because they're truly just a very tiny microscopic fish. And if we look closely at the peat before dumping it in the water, we can sort of see some of the eggs in that peat as well. So now typically what you would do is probably have 2 or 3 containers of variable sizes. One small, you could even do this in a little bowl if you wanted to hatch them in. Then you would take a turkey baster, put them in a larger tank. Not too big, you want it to be easy for them to find the foods you're going to be offering, which you can offer the microworms. You can hatch out your own brine shrimp, which is what I would suggest, or you can find some very small grain fry food, and hopefully that'll work for you as well. Finally, having a larger size for when they become adults, and getting to adult size only takes a few months with these guys until they're to breeding size. Again, they only live for a few seasons, or a 1 year. That's why they call them annuals. So of course they have to get to sexual breeding maturity relatively fast. The thing that fascinates me about killifish the most is how hands-on these fish are, yet they are relatively simple to keep. You start off with tiny little eggs, so you get to experience hatching eggs for the first time if you've never bred fish before. Then of course you get to make your own food for them. You can create a brine shrimp hatchery, for example, and that's what I would highly suggest you do. Then you get to grow them out into adults within a very short period of time. Again, being so rewarding. You've hatched your fish, you've created the food for them, and you grew them out into an absolutely stunning animal. Now, annual killifish in the aquarium will live probably around 2 years, so there's no worry about your fish dying in a few months. Now, where can you get some killifish? You're not going to be able to walk into your local fish store and find killifish, usually not. Maybe you'll find 1 or 2 different species, but there is such a variety. My suggestion is to buy the eggs online. A good seller will provide the date they're ready to hatch, some information about them, and maybe even some food like I got. You can get these on places like eBay. However, my suggestion would be to join a local killifish club. Maybe there's some clubs on Facebook or some killifish forums. There's also killifish associations. I mean, the world of killifish is its own little hobby within a hobby, and I've said that about stingrays and Asian arowana in the past, but killifish are kind of their own niche as well. A massively supportive community out there. I highly suggest you get your killifish eggs from some known breeders and whatnot. And don't make the mistake I did by not being around for several days in the blistering cold when your eggs arrive. Otherwise, you're probably not going to get a very good hatch rate. Now, I don't have much confidence in these guys. I'm not sure how many are going to hatch. But again, it's only been a few hours and we're already seeing some results. But I think that just attests to their hardiness and how easy this can be. I literally just scooped some water out of the tank behind me, tossed in all of these eggs, and they started to hatch. So it's pretty awesome to see. Again, I no longer really have plans for killifish. However, I think that perhaps in the near future we'll take a more serious attempt at this. Set up a racking system, grow their food, hatch the eggs, etc. So if that's something you want to see and you're not subscribed to this channel yet, I highly suggest you do, because you're not going to want to miss that. As for these guys, again, I don't have high hopes, but I do have a little tiny aquarium in the house that if these guys make it, I'll put them in there. But I think I just wanted to use this opportunity to introduce you to those that don't know about it, a pretty amazing fish.